Listen to the All in My Head podcast on Spotify, Apple Music, and wherever you get your podcasts.
Please, allow me to show you something.
Welcome back to the All in My Head podcast. I'm Jenny, and I am your host. And you have landed here for episode 19 of season 2. I can't believe we're this far along, but this is episode 19, and episode 19 is called Paper Planes and Pen Pals, Letters Searching for Home. And let me tell you a little bit about our guest today. For 10 years, 50 countries, and 100 flights, Ryan Dube has wandered the world writing letters home about all that he has learned. Ryan compiled and curated those letters and published them as a book called Paper Planes. His dream was to share these writings with travelers who would hear their own voices in his words. So Ryan packed his bags and embarked on a 365-day international book tour. He has been traveling throughout Asia for nearly 11 months to date, audaciously attempting to creatively promote his book and to meet friends and future readers. This is the first time in Ryan's life that when someone asks what he does, he tells them the truth. I am a writer. And I have personally known Ryan for close to 20 years now, which is pretty crazy. My oldest son and his sister have been friends since the age of 12 or 13, so we know his family well. And I have been following Ryan's journey as a writer for years now. I have purchased and read both of his books. His first book is The Bandana Boy, which I believe was published back in 2019. So if you haven't read that book, I highly suggest you check it out. And today we're going to talk about Paper Planes. And that's Ryan's second book that he published in 2024, correct? And I just have to say that I personally love Ryan's writing. It's raw, it's vulnerable, and it's, if I just put it simply, it's beautiful. So welcome, Ryan, to the episode.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for taking time. And like I said, Ryan has been traveling. Our first pre-recording was from Vietnam. And then you hopped over to Laos, where the internet was not so great. So we waited until you got back to the States so that we could record this episode. But I'm so honored. And let me just ask you to introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your journey as a writer.
Thank you. I think that you introduced me better than I could even introduce myself, honestly. I think this might be my first time actually being introduced in such a way. And it's kind of a surreal little moment because you hear from an outside perspective or more objective perspective, this identity that has been forming over years. But when you're the one trying to shape it and form it and create it, you almost have a constant sense of like imposter syndrome about the character, the person you're creating. So I don't know if I would ever introduce myself as elegantly as you did. I'd probably be a little more self-critical, but this is who I am. I'm Ryan. I'm from Manchester, Connecticut. And I, my whole life, have wanted to live stories and tell stories. And that's essentially been the way that I design my life and structure my dreams. And everything to me is about the story at the heart of it. And so I always try to live aligned and close to the heart and follow the dreams wherever they take me, and then try to find the story that I'm supposed to get out of it, and then find a creative way to share that story. So essentially that's my life design, my life process. And I think the older I get and the more experience that I gather, I think I'm getting more confident and more creative in the ways that I'm going about trying to share those stories. And I think that brings us to here, where we are now, talking about the letters and the book and the journey that I went on to try to share that book with as many people as I could.
And we're definitely going to get into that because that's a big part of, well, just the journey of Paper Planes and yes, how we've gotten here, but also just we're going to definitely dive into that book because it's amazing. And it was such a great take on kind of the life you were living at that time. But you touched on imposter syndrome. So I'm going to kind of jump around in my questioning because we've talked about that in our pre-recording and how we questioned our purposes. And I'm much older than you. I'm more your parents' age than you. But it took me a long time to kind of come to that epiphany in my life that this is my purpose, not only the podcasting, but the writing that I've been doing. And I just got 2 Amazon KDP journals up on Amazon, and I'm working on my first poetry book. But it took me a long time to get to that point and feeling like I could call myself a writer. I could call myself a podcaster. But I also think it was perfect timing for me. I don't think I was ready for that journey. I was doing other things, raising kids. So I found that this has been a wonderful platform for me to showcase not only what I have to say, but also to, show myself in a real and vulnerable way. And you've done that with your writing. So can you talk a little bit about imposter syndrome and maybe how you kind of have guided your way through it and got to that point where you're able to call yourself a writer? Because you're a writer, you're an author.
I think imposter syndrome, regardless of your creative field or even professional field, I think that it stems from just maybe a misunderstanding or a definition that's not calibrated, or like an uncalibrated definition of success in some given field. And I think that we believe success to be dependent on a specific outcome. For a writer, perhaps it's the size of your audience or the number of books that you sell, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for myself, I always wanted to hold myself to a high standard. And so I kind of accepted the definition of success that this industry has created over time. But then I started to really consider why I write and why I wanted to share. And I realized that being a writer for me was more about how I interpret life and how I make sense of everything that didn't make any sense. And I think for me, I realized that I almost didn't have a choice to be a writer, and that it was just the lens that I looked at life through these stories and through taking very hard lessons that I learned and trying to convert them into something beautiful and something relatable, as much to express myself, to kind of hear my own voice out loud, in a sense, to say, is this what I've learned? And also to share with other people who are trying to learn the same lessons in maybe different ways. So I think that's one of the first things that I realized was that I'm not even choosing to be a writer necessarily. And so I don't have to hold myself to a standard of success as a profession, but it is who I am as a human. And being a human doesn't really have the same parameters of success. So I could kind of alleviate that pressure that I was putting on myself. And I also started to realize that your audience is, you are the audience for someone else, as is somebody else is the audience for you. Mm-hmm. And I have learned to become content with an audience of one, an audience of few, an audience of none. And there's a famous quote by some Greek or Roman philosopher that I'm loosely paraphrasing. So I'm sure if you Google around, you'll find it better stated than the way that I've phrased it. But essentially just being content to be your own audience and to be that audience for somebody else. Because if I'm looking for somebody else to validate my work, and yet they're looking for me or somebody like me to validate their work, who says that I'm not allowed to validate my own work? And I think once I reached that point and realized that I am the audience that I'm looking for, and that I'm writing this for myself and to hear what I actually feel and what I think it really allowed me to fully step into saying, this is what I do and this is who I am. And also the fact that I don't passionately have anything else to answer. It is the most true answer that I have. And so I think also by accepting fully that this is how I want to live and what I want to do, I think you stop making excuses and you stop trying to protect your ego, and you don't feel that you owe it to anybody to already have had success. You will never be a writer if you never write, but you are still a writer even if you... Wait, how do I want to say this? I wanted to say something better. Essentially, I'm a writer whether I write or not. And so I don't need to have the words on the paper to prove it. And I think that's really comforting, because you can just embrace and accept who you are. And I think it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The more that you say that you're a writer, the more people will respect you as a writer and treat you as a writer. And then
Right.
next thing you know, before you are a writer and you're writing all the time.
Right. And I think that that's it. I think that I took this course last semester with this wonderful woman, Becky, and she said that she went around the room and kind of asked people to kind of introduce themselves and introduce what they're looking to get out of the course, but also like, who are you or what are you about? And most everyone, and these were all people kind of 50 and over, were like, and I think I want to be a writer. And she would go, you're a writer. She would always say to them, you are a writer. Have you written anything? Have you written anything down? You're a writer. And then also in turn, like coming to that realization, and this was a big one for me, was I kept thinking, what should I put out first? What should my first book be about? And someone in that class said, well, I don't know what other people want to hear. And she's like, you're doing it for all the wrong reasons then. Like, what do you want it to be? What is your voice? What is calling to you? The audience will find the book. The people will gravitate towards it and they will find it. What do you want to put out? And then that for me was such an epiphany because poetry has always been my first love. And poetry is something I do, whether I'm thinking I'm doing it or not, because a lot of my journaling turns into poems. So for me, that was a huge epiphany of like, yeah, I have to stop and write what I want to write and make my first book what I want to put out. So I get that. Like, you're always writing. We're always writing. So we're writers. That's all there is to it. Like, as much as I would say some days like, I should stop doing that, and maybe I'm going to walk away from that. It's such a gravitational pull. So yeah, I would agree with that 100%.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And even on that same note, it's funny because recently I've been speculating on this. So this topic is always top of mind, it seems. But I've been thinking that I've always thought that my writing would take me further. Like, for some reason, I created this idea, this vision of me with my pen and paper and having it carry me to these unforeseen heights and elevate me and elevate my life and enrich my life in ways that I could never imagine. And there was a sense of disappointment that hadn't come true or hadn't taken shape yet. But then I also have to think, well, let's look backwards almost. What would my life be like if I didn't write at all? And how much has it actually changed? How much has it already elevated and enriched my life? And I would be in a much different place mentally, emotionally, spiritually, however you want to describe it, if I wasn't writing. And so exactly. I just want to remember to be grateful for all that writing as an outlet and a creative pursuit has provided me in my life to this point, regardless if it doesn't meet some stature of success that I naively and when I was very young kind of created for myself and been chasing that shadow ever since. But
yeah, I think we all do that as writers. I think we always make this like, I need to reach this goal or I need it to be this way. And I'm doing things quite backwards from how I thought I would ever do it. And in reality, not even thinking I would probably ever publish anything. I just was always like, maybe someday. And now here I am, probably by the end of the summer, I'll have that book out. And I started with journals because that's been something I've been passionate about. But stepping into creativity in a different way and just looking at it and going, I'm being creative every day and I'm putting my heart and soul into it. So it's right. It doesn't matter what standards society is putting on it. So I agree with that 100%. All right, well, let's get into it. What inspired Paper Planes and where did the idea for this story take flight?
So Paper Planes was never intended to be a book. It was never intended to be shared. It was the equivalent of a journal. It was or a diary or some form of needing words to escape the mind and needing a place to put it. So I found paper. Right. And it really began. So the origin story is this. It starts in high school, 11th grade calculus class. And at this point in my life, I had made up my mind that I wasn't going to pursue a traditional form of education or higher education. I wasn't going to attend university. I knew that I had other plans. And truthfully, all I really wanted to do was travel, experience, and I already knew I wanted to tell stories. So my
Right.
theory was I need to live some great stories before I can sit down and write any great story, because I need to know what's in a great story. I need to
Right.
I need to feel it. I need to put real emotions and feelings and
Yeah.
thoughts.
You need to live it. Right.
Exactly. If anybody's ever going to pull anything meaningful out of it. So at this point, I made it publicly known to friends and peers that I wasn't going to be attending school, and that I was going to travel and save up money and kind of work odd job my way through my youth.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my one of my teachers, who became a close friend over time, was always trying to consult me and to try to advise me and try to
Mm-hmm.
guide me back, steer me back towards the traditional route for my own security and for my own, safety of my future, to live up to my
Right.
potential, all these things that we worry about. And we used to banter back and forth. And I remember one conversation vaguely where I essentially just threw up my hands because I could only defend my ideas so
Mm-hmm.
much. And I said, you know what? My life plan is simple. I'm going to go find a beach and I'm going to live on it. And that's that. And that's a hard plan to argue with. I don't think anybody.
No, that's what we're doing in our season of life. We're here in Myrtle Beach, living our best life by the beach. So I get it.
I think most people wait their whole life to do that. And I said, I'm just going to start with that. And so when finally the opportunity to travel arrived, I went to India for my first time. It was the first time ever leaving the country. I traveled with an aunt who I barely knew. We got the backpacks out. We traveled for 1 month, and we left all technology at home. We said, no phones, let's be off the grid. And I had never even been to Canada.
Wild.
Yeah. And so the culture shock was real, and it was all overwhelming, but it was such a beautiful and surreal experience. I felt very alive, and I wanted to document it. I was so desperate to document this experience because I understood how novel it was. And I understood that in the future, I would like to reminisce on this, and I don't want to miss these details because there was just so much stimulation. I didn't know what was meaningful and what would be memorable and what I would forget tomorrow. So I started to write kind of bullet notes to myself. This is what I ate for breakfast. This is where we went. And that didn't really align with me. It kind of felt repetitive, redundant, and boring. And I never actually looked back at it. So I kept trying to find different ways basically to document this experience. And I tried to journal, and I was writing to myself, and then I just couldn't. It felt like an echo, and I didn't like the idea of writing to myself directly and just telling myself the things that I was thinking. It seemed a strange paradox, but I didn't enjoy it. And so I was just laying there in my hammock. I remember the moment I was eating a Snickers bar, and I was reading The Alchemist at the time, and I realized that my little hut that I was staying in for the night was on the beach. And then it hit me. I was like, wow, I'm like living on the beach. And this phrase triggered that conversation from a few years past with my teacher. And I laughed, and I thought I should reach out. I should let her know that I did it as a joke. I'm doing it. Just to reconnect. And so I started a letter to her and essentially just wrote her name and said, hey, I'm living on a beach like I said I always would. And then everything after that were all of the thoughts that were spiraling, and deep emotions and sentiments and understandings and realizations I had been accumulating over the time and over the trip. And I just expressed them all into this one letter, and it felt very cathartic. So yeah, I just wrote to her and I told her about what I was doing. And then next thing I knew, I just expressed everything that I had ever thought and felt. All the epiphanies I've had, all of the life lessons I'd learned up until that point in my life. And it was just a very cathartic experience and expression. And I enjoyed it so thoroughly on a human level, to be able to share this kind of intimate thought with somebody else that I already had a connection with. And I just became obsessed with it and addicted to it. And everywhere I went, every time I traveled from then on out, I would find time to sit down and pull out the pen and paper, and I would just think about my thoughts and think about my feelings and express them. And I would write them in letters to her. So I wrote letters to her in that manner for 10 years. So everywhere I went from then on out, every thought that I had, I found kind of a poetic way to express them. And the letters evolved over the years from more direct. It started as very direct. This is what I'm doing, and I'm having so much fun. And then it became kind of just these expositions on bigger life topics, like here's what I feel about love and heartbreak, and here's what I believe about purpose. Do you agree? And in a sense, I always knew I was writing to myself for myself, but it was
Right.
just so wonderful to have a pen pal to give me a sense of purpose in my writing and give me a sense of purpose in my expression, to say that if I can share this with at least one person, then maybe I can connect, maybe I can relate, and maybe I can be heard.
Yeah. And I love that, because as I was reading your book, and I have both your books sitting right here in front of me, but I definitely saw that shift in how life changes, right? I mean, it's 10 years of time. So life shifts, your perspective shifts, but also there were some seriously vulnerable moments in there, and some things that literally brought me to tears. And I felt the connection, but I got it. You know what I mean? Like I could almost put myself into a scene at the same age you are, or were at that time, and kind of pinpoint a moment where I felt that same kind of feeling. So that's how writing should be, and that's how writing transfers to the reader. You know, you never know what someone is going to get from your reading. So I felt that like instantly. And I'm also that person who I love to sit down and write like a personalized letter to somebody. Like I would much rather than type a text to somebody or whatever. So to see that being done in that way, and that it translated into this kind of big journey, which in turn turned into this beautiful book, was just awe-inspiring. So I think on my end, like that inspired me to go, wait a second, my story is whatever my story is. Like it's not what somebody else wants it to be. It's what my story is. And that's how, again, the podcast kind of came to be, that it's like, it's everything that's in my head is what you're hearing, or what I'm thinking about, or what's on my heart. So all in my head was then born. So I have to give you a thanks for that too.
Well, I think the medium is perfect for you. And I think the medium for me with the letters was perfect for expressing what I wanted to express. And because with pen and paper, I just take longer to think thoughts and to express them. And I think finding the right channel for your expression is just invaluable. But yeah, I think it's interesting. I think what's most interesting about the letters is that they were captured in the moment, and they're not like a retroactive reflection with hindsight involved. And I think I captured just rawly what I was feeling, and whether months later, years later, I felt the same or not was irrelevant. And there were many times when I was reading back through the letters where I would want to edit them or curate them or say something that I said, but a little bit wiser, a little bit more beautifully, and craft them.
Right.
And I refused, because I didn't want to lose the rawness of them. And I didn't want to tell a different story than the story that I lived. And I think as soon as I start manipulating the emotions of the past, then it won't maybe connect to people, because I think intentionally, if I'm trying to write or rewrite so that I connect with more people, I might actually lose the audience that I was looking for, because nobody says things perfectly the first time.
Right.
And you learn a hard lesson. You know, if it's your first time learning a hard lesson, it's going to be a much different experience than learning it the second time, which is inevitable, it seems. And so I think when I look back, maybe I was detached from some of the events that happened, but I recognized the emotions when I re-encountered them. And I recognized and remembered those periods of my life based on the sentiments that I felt. Yeah.
Right. And I think that's perfectly said, because if you go back, you're really changing the narrative. You're rewriting the narrative of all of it. So it really kind of showed that progression, not only in your life, but in your feelings and in your emotions, and kind of how you were expressing, and not only expressing, but how you were feeling at that time. So I think it was perfectly done. Why do you think writing letters is such a powerful tool?
Wow, that's a great question. I think the irony of that is I didn't choose a letter for any reason besides that was the way I could reach her. I didn't have a phone. I didn't have a phone at the time. I had no technology. If I wanted to send an email, I had to go walk to the internet cafe down the street and pay to log into my Facebook and send a message or something. Like that was the level of traveling I was doing at the time. So a letter just felt like the most natural extension. I said, if I want to send her my ideas, it needs to go on this piece of paper. But I think the irony is how well that aged over time, and how writing a letter has evoked such a sense of nostalgia in people because of all the constant forms of communication that we have, and we're so constantly hyper connected that there's not even enough space between two people for an idea to bounce back and forth. And I think that
Right.
with writing a letter, I mean, I can get into so much of what I love about it, like the actual tactile experience. Like I love pushing a comfy pen into a soft paper, and I love these journals that I'm accumulating, trying to find the perfect canvases for the words that I want to write. But then I think there's also something beautiful about showing somebody how much time you're willing to take to say something to them. And I think it's a
Right.
higher level of investment into your friendship and your relationship, because I think it's almost too convenient to be friends and connected at this point where everyone kind of stays at the surface because there's no real investment necessary. And so I think that writing somebody a letter is a very intentional way of saying, I'm thinking of you and I have something to say to you specifically. Because there's so much broadcasting being done in today's society where I can go on my Instagram live and talk to everyone at once. And maybe I have something special to say, but it doesn't feel special to every individual person because this message is meant for the masses of whoever is willing to listen. But so I think there's something very special about somebody having something specific to say to you. And I think that's why letters are just such a great medium to express something really sentimental and important.
Yeah, and I feel the same way. Like you could look around my room right now and you can see books everywhere, but you can see 100 journals. And then behind me, there's the 2-3 journals that I just created. So those are up there and I haven't even like put a pen to them yet because I'm just like, I'm still kind of taking it all in. But it's such a personal thing to sit and to write someone a letter, right? And even your writing and the formation of letters, it emotes something completely different. Someone can look at a text and can take it, and I've said this a million times to my kids, especially because sometimes I'll just get this one line text and I'm just like, is this a crisis or are we just saying, I don't know, it might be in the middle of a sentence or middle of a thought and they just thought to shoot it out to me. And then I'm receiving it in one way, but they were saying it in a completely different way. And I'm just like, okay, sometimes we have to have a physical conversation so I can see you. You know, I need to video chat you. But someone, and I've known this as I've been getting letters from some people that I grew up with, and I'm looking at the letter and I'm just like, wow, like I can remember who they were for me growing up, but also who they still are. Like even the formation of their letters is very gingerly written and it's really beautiful and touching. And I just know that they're still that same person and even the words that they're saying. So for me, again, writing a letter is just so different and so, so personal that I'm always telling my kids and anyone who will listen, like write somebody a letter. Like they would love that. Like, and we're doing it with my granddaughter soon, hopefully, as she's just learning how to write her letters. But, so she can have pen pals that she can start writing to and get a letter back. Because I think it's important. I just think this is great and social media is great, but a lot gets lost in it. So we want to preserve that. Yeah. So tell us about kind of how your pen pals came about to be, because that was kind of initial before you even started this journey of traveling. And we'll get into that in a minute as well. But tell us about your pen pals.
I think what I wanted to create was an audience of people for whom I could provide the same sense of security and comfort and confidence that my pen pal provided for me simply by being the recipient of my letters. And so I thought it was a beautiful sentiment to share that, because I was trying to creatively promote and market a book of travel letters, to create this kind of identity of being a pen pal for anybody who is willing to read my letters. Because in a very real sense, if you were to order my book and I were to hand you my book, I'm shipping you a whole entire envelope of letters, and you're taking the time to read them and be my pen pal. And so I thought it was just a very beautiful relationship that I could form with the readers in a more personal way than just somebody who perhaps just purchased a product and you never have that kind of interaction, that level of intimate interaction. And so this is where the idea started. I also was trying to really step into this role of being a writer and embracing it and self-promoting. And I'm not a very self-promotional person. I'm not a person that really wants the attention on me. I'd rather sit and observe. And it almost felt like I needed a good reason for them to buy my book. Not just because it's a good book, but I needed a better reason. I needed, an extra bonus for them for to take the chance on my words. And I just wanted to try to market and to promote the book. I don't even like the word market. It just,
I know it's such a strange word when you're talking about yourself and what you do.
When I'm talking about my art, and I think this even goes back to why I even put the letters together into a book, was because I was recognizing within the letters a lot of answers to questions that friends had been asking me vulnerably over the years. And these are letters that I didn't often read. And so I wasn't always very cognitively aware that I had these words of wisdom etched into paper that hidden away in my shoebox. And so the more I would realize that these letters actually could provide answers to some people struggling with some deep questions that I had struggled with myself, I realized I wanted to share them. And I began by sharing them one at a time with people who would catch up with me about life and tell me that they were going through a tough period. And I would say, I have a letter that I think you should read. I think it'll really resonate with you. And I would share it.
Right.
They would be thankful, and they'd ask if they could share it with a friend, or they would say, do you have any other letters about anything else? Because I'm just curious to read your mind and hear what your experience was, because maybe I can connect it to my own experience. And so that's how it began. And I realized, you know what, these letters could make a really beautiful book. And so when I decided to put them together, I had this compilation of letters and tried to make a story out of it, find the narrative for it, create kind of a brand around it so that people would be convinced to read it, because I wanted to reach people who didn't know me. And so if you're just going around saying, hey, I put all my diary entries into it, I want to read it, I don't think it's going to appeal to many people who weren't immediate friends and family. And so I tried to find a narrative that really aligned with why I was sharing it. And essentially I was just like, hey, this is the story of a traveler. This is what it's like to have a nomadic heart, and to what it's like to follow your dreams into the darkness. And here's the reality of it, and I think that will relate to people. And I think that the ultimate goal was that for people to read my words and feel like they wrote some of them. I think that's really what I was looking for. And because I think it's funny because a lot of people want to be very unique creatively. They want to be somebody who comes up with something that nobody's ever thought of before. But I almost take the exact opposite approach. I want to say relatable things. I want to say things that speak to the human existence so that I can connect with people over it. I don't want to share thoughts that people say, wow, that's genius, clever, but I never have felt that in my life. Then it kind of misses me,
Exactly.
And so I wanted to create a sense of camaraderie. And the idea for the paper planes was simple because I used to write all the time when I was flying on planes. I would write these letters, and I used to imagine myself folding them into little paper planes and throwing them out the window and landing wherever they land, and hoping in this metaphor that they landed in the hands of people who wanted to read them. And so that's kind of how the actual project took shape, and the idea of considering people pen pals, and then kind of all of the future promotional marketing things that I did kind of off that brand of we're all pen pals writing to each other.
Right. And it's so interesting that you say that too. Like you're hoping that it would resonate with somebody and it would speak to somebody's heart because it was a relatable experience. And I think that that's like the day I launched, the first episode of the podcast, that I woke up, I launch it at midnight. So I wake up and I'm like, well, if 3 people read it, and the 3 were my 3 sons, then I'm good. I feel good about that because at least they took time to listen. When I woke up and it was like 20 something, and I'm like, who is listening to this? And then you start getting into the statistics and seeing kind of the demographic of where people are. And I think we're in like 128 cities and 20 countries now. And that is wild to me. Like, first of all, like, who's listening and what's going on? And I get these return listeners because you get these, and I'm just like, that's fascinating. But it's life when you have these life experiences and you're just talking from your heart and you're getting kind of what you have been thinking about and not only your thought process on it, but also just the lived experience. Somebody's going to find it and somebody's going to say that person is so relatable. And I think the biggest obstacle for me was my voice. I'm like, I don't like listening to my voice. So who is going to like listening to my voice? And I remember I'm also teaching a class on podcasting for people over 50, which is hilarious to me. And they were like, oh, you're so different in the class. And I was like, well, I've got to do a show for you, right? I got to keep you engaged. And they're like, yeah, your podcasting voice is so mellow and it's very relaxed. And it's so, and you're like, and I'm like, well, right, I'm teaching you. I got to keep you engaged. It's very different. But yeah, it's just not only not worrying about what other people are thinking, but also just knowing that it's going to land where it needs to land and it's going to find its audience. And that's the blessing of it all.
It's so funny, though. I do find such irony in some readers who circle back to me or write back to me, and they just speak on the wisdom of the book and they find a lot of comfort in it. And I think it's ironic to read a letter written by somebody who's spiraling emotionally and doesn't know what's going on, doesn't know what's happening,
because it's relatable.
Yeah, who only has questions and no answers. And then they say, thank you for your wisdom. And I said, what's their wisdom in there? Because I it's almost like, no, I'm asking. I'm not telling you anything. I'm like, am I right or am I crazy? Like, can we connect on that?
No, but it's so relatable to people that there's been quite a few of my episodes. I mean, I have one that's all about childhood trauma and people are like, and that was a hard one for me to do, but it was such a weight lifted after I was done. But also I was kind of like, oh my gosh, that's a lot. That's a lot to put on other people. But people related to it because they were like, I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one who's gone through stuff like this. And so for them, for the audience, it was kind of like, wow. And for somebody to be vulnerable about it, it's only taken me 50 years to get to that point to be able to talk about these things, but I'm talking about them. And when is it too late to talk about things? I don't think that's ever a thing. So I get where people have said to you, like, thank you for your wisdom. And maybe it wasn't necessarily wisdom, but it was like, I feel seen because I felt like I was spiraling in that moment as well. And I felt like I was losing my mind and I had no clue what I was doing. But also at the same time, I had to just get it out because it was going to like tear me apart. So people can relate on that level because I could, for sure.
And I think that's the most validating feedback that I received from somebody who's read the book is saying, I thought I was the only one who felt that way. Because so did I. So did I when I wrote it. And hence why I'm sharing it, so that people don't feel like they're the only ones who felt these things and thought these thoughts.
And I think that's what's wonderful about your generation. And I've told my own kids this. There are days where I wish I had healed and I had done the work or unpacked this stuff in my 20s, but I don't think I was ready. You know, it's heavy. You know, it's heavy when you're dealing with these kinds of emotions. And we talk about mental health and we talk about trauma, and it's a lot. And I don't think I was ready because I was also a parent to 3 kids. So to unpack all that and then try to be a parent, and would I have kept it all together? So I look at them and I'm like, wow, you guys have done some work and I'm proud of you for that. And I wish I had done it. But again, I think everything happens in its perfect timing. I wasn't ready to. I didn't even know a lot of the stuff that was going on in my mind until you start unpacking and then all the skeletons start coming out and you're just like, oh, where were you? I didn't even know you were there. Hi. But I don't think I was ready for that. And I don't think I was emotionally equipped to deal with that stuff at that age. I could only do what I could do. Right. So I always look at this younger generation and go, wow, you guys are doing the work and you're doing it so much earlier in life, right? So your next generation to come, children and grandchildren and all the other generations to come are only going to be that much better because you have done the heavy lifting for them. So I have to give your generation. I know people talk crap about the younger kids. I don't. I'm like, you guys are doing it and you guys are vocal about it. And I feel that has made me feel less vulnerable in sharing and feeling like, again, I'm not alone. So why can't I talk about these things? Not just because my generation said we don't talk about those things, right? Well, I'm talking about it. So if you don't want to hear it, don't tune in. But we're talking about it. We're talking about it. So this episode is entitled Searching for Home. So what does home mean to you? And how did it show up in this theme of this book as well? Because you were all over the world and traveling. So what does home mean to you?
Another powerful question.
Hard hitting here. It's like
This is
hard hitting journalism here, Ryan.
this is the major leagues. I see that. I don't even think I could have prepared an answer for that, even if I had seen a script, So
This is why we don't give this to you ahead of time. We got it right on the mark, right? We're putting you on the spot.
well, I appreciate it. I appreciate just being asked these things because it offers me the opportunity to actually reflect and to actually think what I feel about this, because I've had so many different responses throughout the course of my life to this question. And ultimately, home is such an ambiguous term for me, because the more that I traveled when I was young, it became kind of a cliche, like, oh, like, what are you running away from? And to me, I was always running to something. I was chasing curiosity and following it wherever it took me. Cliche, maybe following my heart, but never knowing where it was going to bring me. And then never really finding the exact answer I was looking for, always coming back with more questions. And so there's always this feeling of being unsettled, because I'm not a person that can live with curiosity and not try to satiate it and not try to find the answers. And so I think that alone led to a very nomadic existence, which in turn kind of saturated the idea of home, because I would create a home in so many different places and create a home with so many different people, which I thought was beautiful. And so in a sense, I think that when I am just my fullest self, when I am being me anywhere, I can create a sense of home, and I can create a sense of family with people who aren't family, in homes without houses. And I do believe this, but that general core nostalgic concept of like, where is home or who is home, I think it's just an ever shifting definition. And I don't think it'll be ever written in ink. I think I'll always need to write the answer to this question in pencil so I can erase it, because I don't know. Because I don't know if it's a place, because I go to places that used to be home that don't feel like home anymore. So maybe it's a feeling, maybe it's a sentiment of a time, a bygone era. It was suddenly the golden days don't look so golden in the pictures, and then it doesn't feel like home anymore. And now my answer's changed. So I really don't know what to tell you. I don't know who has an answer to that. Hope somebody has.
I think that's so perfect, because somebody said that to me recently, and my father-in-law passed it'll be a year in July. And so we had to go back to Connecticut, and we wwe were with the family and doing the whole funeral and wake thing. But everybody would say to me, like, it's been 6 years in May that we've been in South Carolina now. And they're like, is this still home? Does it feel like home? And yeah, people feel like home when you see them, but it's not home anymore. It's definitely not home. And it feels different. And it was home when I was raising my kids, and it was home, and it felt good, and it felt comfortable. But I think, home is ever shifting, and it's also different people. Like you said, friends that have become family to me that are closer than some of my own family. So that's very much a feeling of home. And when I talk to them or when I get to see them, but it is ever changing and ever shifting. I definitely go back to Connecticut, and there's things that feel like home. Maybe I want to go visit a specific restaurant or see a group of friends, but to call it home anymore, it was home once, but it's not home anymore.
I think my definition has become even more ambiguous and amorphous after this 365-day backpacking adventure, because I found myself, if I stayed in the same hostel for 3 nights, I would be saying, hey, let's go home and do this, this, and this. And we'd be referring to this hostel as my home, because that's where I was living my life. And I think maybe that's why home has to be an active answer, where it's where you are living your life, and or maybe it's the cliche of home is where the heart is. So if your heart is with you, which for me would be an ideal way to live as a human, to always be where my heart is, and thus justifying me following it everywhere it wants me to go, because I just don't want to be living without it, because maybe that's at the end of the day where home really is. So I've been in a house that I've lived in for years, and it didn't feel like home anymore. And I've been in a place that I'd never stepped foot in before, and suddenly it felt like home. And the circumstances are just too nebulous to try to define. And so I just shrug my shoulders and appreciate where I am. And,
Right, exactly. Right. And let's talk about that. You were gone. You were traveling. You were 11 months. You were out of the country and traveling. And what did that look like? Maybe let's start with like, how did that come to be? And what did it turn into?
the idea to travel for a calendar year. So I actually did accomplish the full 12 months. I went birthday to birthday.
You did.
I did. So
Perfect.
I went birthday to birthday, which I thought was symbolic um, and just
Absolutely.
So the idea originated in the fact that I had never traveled consecutively for more than 5 months, 6 months. Being gone, and I would always have to run back home, and I've always wondered what it would be like to actually kind of live life on the road. And a year just kind of always stuck out in my head as a challenge, a kind of this amount of time that would really push me and challenge me in all the ways and force me to grow in ways that having the comfort of going home wouldn't allow me to. So I needed to kind of leave. I kind of had to shut the door behind me, pack the suitcase, and say, I'm not coming back for a long enough period of time where I really felt detached and isolated and out there in the world so that I could start to feel some of the things I needed to feel. And like I said, grow in the way that I wanted to grow. And so at the time when I started to ideate this, I realized that I need the right opportunity in my life. I needed the timing to be right. I needed to make sense. I needed to feel aligned with my actual priorities and goals, because I didn't want to just, my whole life I'd kind of prioritized traveling to such a degree that it was very easy to leave everything else aside, brush everything else aside, and just go full into traveling, where this time I wanted traveling to be incorporated into my dreams and into my progress as a person. And I found the ultimate opportunity, because at the same time that I had finally time off and I didn't have to quit anything or leave anything behind, I also had this project, the Paper Planes project, that I was coming to an end with. And I just thought, wow, what a special opportunity this would be if I could take this book and go share it with other travelers all around the world. And that way I can kind of merge these two dreams of traveling for a year and accomplishing this big lifelong goal, but also a very practical approach to trying to share my writing. And I thought, this is a book of travel letters, then the people who need to read this are travelers. And where do I find travelers? Well, you find them traveling. And so I thought I didn't need to be convinced. I didn't need to be convinced anymore that I was going to take this opportunity, but it all aligned and it made sense. And so I said, okay, this is going to be a 1-year book tour where I go around and I travel and I experience novel things and I meet incredible people and I share my words with them and relate to them on a human level. And that was really my only intention. And it was surreal.
It sounds like it was amazing. And can you give a couple examples as to like how you, because a book tour for, a book tour, and I'm saying that in quotes, right? Like if a publisher puts out this book tour, it's going to look very different as to how they want it to look, right? You're going to go do a reading in a store or a cafe and a book signing. So how did you find yourself sharing these stories and sharing these letters in this book with people as you were traveling?
So it instantly became logistically more complicated, as one would imagine, but as I did not imagine than I thought initially. And I think the struggle that I faced was more so that I didn't want it to feel that I was meeting anyone or creating inauthentic relationships or friendships with the ulterior motive to try to sell them my work. I didn't want to try to befriend people so that then maybe they would purchase my book, because to me it just felt very inauthentic. And I struggled a lot with even bringing it up in conversation, and not from a humility standpoint, which maybe in the past I would just be too shy or reserved, but more in the sense of I just would almost avoid it in conversation unless we really continue to develop a relationship in further conversation, because then it felt more natural and almost
Right.
unavoidable to bring up because that is why I was there. So I think the progression of the actual book tour was mainly online, kind of, I call them experiments, which is like I have an
Mm-hmm.
idea of this could work to sell a book. So I created a pen pal program where I would connect people that I met with other traveler friends that I have, kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? I would be like a liaison and
Right.
transfer addresses and set up this pen pal. So I had tons of pen pals. I created a book club at one point where I put a bunch of travel friends into book clubs. I used to
Mm-hmm.
do like guerrilla marketing with actual paper planes where I would print the planes or print the letters and fold them into planes and write like a little handwritten note on them.
Mm-hmm.
I would take pictures of the book in scenic places.
Yeah.
I had the idea originally that I would maybe become some sort of pseudo influencer, but I realized very quickly that I did not feel comfortable recording myself or talking to the camera selfie style, and so that was nixed pretty early on in the
So
in the
hard.
ideation phase.
I get it.
But
Because people keep telling me to do that. And I'm like, I think I did my first live today with one of my episodes because the other guest wanted to do that. So I was like, yeah, sure, let's do it. And I'm not nervous. I don't get nervous about stuff. I'm like, I'm too old for that. But I'm like, I was anxious. I was
right,
like,
right.
I do not want to do this. Like,
Yeah.
not that I didn't want to do it for her, but I'm just like, I'm not this person who gets on the camera and is like doing the thing. So I get not wanting to be the influencer.
Yeah, and I think it did thwart some of my plans because a lot of the book sales in my head were contingent on like growing a big following and having people be a part
Mm-hmm.
of the adventure. And then I didn't actually even post anything on Instagram for about the entire year on my personal page because it just suddenly felt unnatural and it didn't feel right like
Mm-hmm.
the right medium to share this kind of work specifically, which was so
Right.
intimate. And so I really tried to focus on creative, like on the ground efforts. And what ended up happening was about halfway through the trip, I realized that I was trying to split my days between being productive and selling books and then trying to actually
Mm-hmm.
experience the places that I was traveling to. I'd never been to any of these places before, and I
Right.
didn't want to be ungrateful for the opportunity to be in these places because I was so busy in a coffee shop trying to figure out how to sell a few books that day. And so what I
Mm-hmm.
ended up ultimately doing was about halfway through, I said, I'm going to stop actively trying to sell books and just let it happen passively and naturally through conversation. And I actually had pretty decent success with selling in that way because it allowed me to spend more time with the people around me, going to have more
Right.
experiences, shared conversations. And through those conversations, if I give a piece of life advice or I share an anecdote or a story and they ask more about my history, and it makes them more connected to the writing,
Mm-hmm.
and it makes, because then I would share a letter and just the same way I naturally would before the book was published, would share a letter with
Right.
them and say, I think you should read this. And then it would lead to ultimately the friend or whoever going home and ordering the book when they got back from traveling. And I just accepted that that was what was destined for this book. And if it didn't make me a best-selling author, then it was never supposed to be. And that's not why I wrote it in the
Mm-hmm.
first place. And so I don't have any disappointment in the outcome because, as we know, it's more about the experience and the journey. And I feel that I'm just proud of myself that I underwent such a big journey and I was audacious enough to put myself out there, and that I found a way to mentally and emotionally enjoy the experience while still being true to why I came out there, but also not
Right.
letting my expectations ruin my experience. And I think that was really important for me.
And I'm so glad that you took that moment to kind of pause and say,
Mm.
I could be spending all this time kind of putting this book out there and just worrying about marketing it and getting it sold, but I'm missing the opportunity of like immersing myself in this culture and what this country has to offer. So like I'm proud of you for taking that and not just
Yeah.
and not squandering it because so many people do, right? And I think especially when you're being marketed as an author, if you're not marketing yourself and someone else is, it's very easy to get lost in what they want, right? Because it's all about the numbers and what you're selling and how many, the volume. So again, like I always say, it's going to find the right audiences and it doesn't matter when your book comes out, it's going to continue to grow in a different way from the connections that you've made. Yeah.
Absolutely. 100%.
Yeah. So we'll say that you're the character of this book, right? Because if you have to say you're a character, right? You're who's the character of this book. You're the character of this book. This is about you. This is about your journey. So how do you think that this journey in writing and writing this book kind of mirrors your own relationship with belonging? That's a tough one.
Wow. Yeah. Another
Yeah.
tough one. Well, I think that firstly, I will say that although I am obviously and objectively the point of view of the novel, because they are my own personal letters, that I tried to put the book together in such a way and create the project and genericize it and make it so general that anyone could relate to it, even if they didn't know me or recognize me as me. I wanted it to really represent a traveler, the experience of a traveler. And that being said, I took all of the names out of it. I took a lot of the exposition out of it that would contextualize my life within a given moment. And I said, I want to create something that shows that I am just another traveler. And it's like I said, it's funny because a lot of people are like, I want my story to stand out. I want to be so uniquely different that this could have only been experienced through me. But I wanted to have the opposite occur. And so, yes, I am absolutely the main character in that sense that they are my words, but I don't think they're my ideas. I think they are bigger than me. I think these ideas come from just a human experience, and I may have phrased them one way that other people haven't said it that way before, perhaps, or maybe I just haven't read enough to realize that somebody has already said everything I've wanted to say, and good, as long as it's being said. And so I think that that's how I look at it in terms of reflecting on myself. I like to say that I did a good job at telling a story that's not about me, but it came through me. So being able to take myself out of it. But that being said, all of the feelings, all of the fears, all of the aspects of the human experience that you encounter in those letters, they came through me and they poured through me. And so they are going to have my DNA all over it. And I think when I read back, this is actually so interesting to me because I didn't anticipate this. When I first started going through the letters to choose which letters were going to make the final book, and I would take out a lot of the exposition about like, I ate this for breakfast. I would just, I was putting it down to make sure that the book would be digestible. I was so emotionally affected reading the letters because I didn't view myself as who I am today because those letters were written by a very different person. And I felt this empathy for this boy who was experiencing something in the middle of something that felt inescapable. And I know now that I was going to be okay, that life would work itself out, that it would ultimately make sense. But in those moments, I was lost and confused and terrified. And there's nothing I could do while I'm reading this letter to help that person. That person in that letter is forever trapped in this sense of paranoia or angst. And there's nothing I can ever do because that is something that happened and I captured it like a photograph, you know? And so when I read the letters back, I hear my old voice, but it's a distant echo. And it's a voice of a younger version of me, a less evolved version, a more immature version, but not to discredit that experience because without that experience, I wouldn't be who I am now. So I'm very thankful that they're taking the bullet for me on this one that let me get to where I am now. And I can kind of sit above it all and read back and reflect from a safe space, from like a protected place. But I also know that it's the irony is not lost on me that any letter that I write today or tomorrow, in 10 years' time, I will be looking back at this version of me and having the same thoughts. So it's me, but it's not me. It's all of us.
And it's wild because I remember distinctly, I would, this was my like bedtime reading material, right? So I always have a book by my bedside that I'm reading at night. And that was the book, Paper Planes. And there were moments, and my husband and I are on very different schedules of sleeping. Like he can put his head on the pillow and go right to sleep. I am not that person. I need something. But there were moments where I would like audibly gasp and just be like, my heart sank for the person, which was you. But also I was like, my gosh, I can relate to that. So there were so many moments where I was like, you wish you could reach through that book and like tell the person how it's going to end up, or that they're going to get through it, or that, you've been there, but you also know at the same time, like I had to go through that too. And I had to journey that journey to get to be the person that I am today. So I could very distinctly, as I'm starting to put this poetry book together, it's very much a journey through my trauma from beginning until this point. And as I'm reading things back, there's moments where I have to sit and I have to remember who I was then and what I had gone through at that time, and that I'm here. And there is a culmination, and it does get better, and there is light at the end. But like you said, what I write today, in 10 years, I'll look back and go, wow.
How little we knew. Maybe you can relate to this with your poetry and reading old poetry, because I feel like there's that sense, like you said, you want to reach through the page and comfort this person. I had a strange, I don't know if it's an epiphany or whatever you want to call it. I had a strange feeling that although my natural instinct, like my intrinsic human reaction would be to console this person and try to protect them from this pain, I shouldn't. And now that I know the outcome, I wouldn't. You can't protect a person from a pain that's meant for them, especially if it's part of the path and it's part of the journey to get to where I want it to be. And so I think of it sometimes like when I'm really going through something, I'm struggling, and I just wish it would end, or I wish that I should quit, or however I am trying to talk myself through it. I realize that if this were a movie, this were a documentary, this is the best part. This is the humanity. This is why you watch. This is what makes the ending a celebration. This is what gives you the context. So if you can take that lens and say, this is me in the fire being forged, just wait until you see the final product. Like, don't turn the TV off. Like, let the movie, let it keep going, because you need to feel this to be able to express that later on.
Absolutely. And I think this book of poetry is a culmination of probably 20, 30 years. I mean, it's a culmination of the lifespan and the things that I've gone through. And I look back, and I said this to my husband the other day. I said, I'm like, the next poetry book is already in my mind. And he's like, whoa, you haven't even finished this one yet. And I said, I was sitting thinking for a very long time that I only wrote in this space of darkness, right? And in despair. And I used to joke, but I remember saying this to Bennett and saying, like, I think my best stuff is the dark stuff. Like, it's what I know, or it's what I've known. And yes, when I look back, I look at these things and I'm like, and in that moment, I could picture myself and think, I don't know if I'm going to get through this. And I don't know if there's a way through it or past it or over it, or if I'm just going to be here forever. And yeah, you would think, gosh, I got to help this person so that they see the other side. But then as I've been looking through and finding to add some more pieces to this, I found so many beautiful poems, now about my children, about their birth, about their moments in their life, about the beach. I could write a whole poetry book about the beach because it's such a beautiful, healing place for me. So as I was going through, I was like, wait, there were moments of light. There were so many moments of beauty. It just was overshadowed by this space of darkness because that's where I was and that's what I was living. But I would not be the person that I am today had I not gone through that. It formed me and it shaped me. So absolutely. Like you have to go through it. But that's not to say that when people read Paper Planes, you're going to have some moments where your heart is going to drop and you're just going to be like, I need to find that little boy and I need to help him. He's fine. He's here. He's on the podcast. He's good. He's learning, he's growing. And it's what shapes us.
It's hard to express that to somebody who hasn't finished going.
Yeah. And especially when they're in it, like when someone's in it, they can't see. I couldn't see. And this episode that drops tomorrow is like permission to feel. It's okay to not be okay. Right. And we glamorize kind of this being okay all the time and putting on this smile and showing up on social media and making everybody think everything's great all the time. But it's okay to not be okay. And you're going to get through it. But it's okay to sit in that and I always say, like, to me, writing it down and is a letting go. It's a release. So I encourage people to write and to sit and to journal, whatever form people write in. It's cathartic. It's very, very much a release. All right. So let's talk about have you had pen pals in your life? Or do you have pen pals now from this journey?
So my first pen pal, my only pen pal that I have had was the pen pal featured in these letters and in this book. I didn't grow up with a pen pal. I understood the concept, but I also didn't even consider the first letter to be the beginning of a pen pal ship. But it ultimately became that, and I'm very thankful for that. And it's actually funny because I never really referred to it, to the situation as kind of a pen pal until I started to put the book together and think of that's really what this was and what this is, and it helped me kind of define the project a little bit more. And so I really embraced that term, and it's a very nostalgic, youthful term that because we always encourage young children to write to pen pals and to write to somebody far away and learn about their cultures and kind of have this interesting idea exchange. And so I think it's a beautiful concept. And yes, throughout my travels, I was very intent on accumulating more pen pals. And I offered to anybody who wanted to be a pen pal that when they finished reading the book, they could write me a letter. Write me a letter about your thoughts, your feelings, about a specific letter that you want to respond to directly. And I actually have a small shoebox full of the letters that people have written back to me. And it's so interesting how unique each letter is, not just in how they're written, but the actual aesthetic of the letter, the paper that they chose. It's like you can really see their fingerprints on it. And you can really tell a lot about the personality of the person by the way that they write to you and what they sent you. And some came with like little gifts, and some came with stickers all over them, and some were written in big like colorful marker, and some were written really fine, and they were trying to fit as many words on the page as you could. And I absolutely loved it. I really just adored receiving these letters. It was like Christmas every time. And so I have them all stashed here. And then throughout the trip, I met a lot of people that propose to write to each other and want to send letters because they heard that they familiarized themselves with the book and the concept, and they thought it was interesting and fascinating, and they realized that they too could use a pen pal. And I think when you realize what a pen pal can actually do for you and how beautiful it is to take the time to actually reflect on your own life and put your thoughts into words, I think that process does a lot of healing. And I think that if I can be the recipient for somebody so that it catalyzes them to go through that process, then then my mailbox will always be open. And so that's where I stand.
So are we saying this could be a part 2 of Paper Planes? Is there a Paper Planes 2 where people are writing to you and are kind of talking about what this book has meant to them in a different way?
That's a wonderful idea and concept. And it actually is something that I have flirted with throughout the trip.
Good. See? Great minds think alike. We're on the same page. Here's a good question. We talked a little bit about like this being a healing journey. Can you talk a little bit about like how this book has been healing to you?
Yes. I think that the project has been extremely healing for me because it has provided purpose for a lot of the suffering that I went through. And I think that's ultimately the highest form of healing, is a sense of closure or a sense of understanding to say, I needed to go through that so that I could share that with these people who are going through it now. And in that sense, I gladly welcome the struggle. I gladly welcome the suffering because I'm aware that it's me taking the test first. It's not a test that's necessarily unique to me. Perhaps it's designed and kind of crafted for me, curated for me, but it's part of the human experience. And I have always been a huge proponent of living life on the entire spectrum of the human experience. I don't want to miss out anything. I want to
Right.
really know what it is to be a human, and I want to feel all of the feelings that people feel. I think that
Mm-hmm.
empathy is a superpower, and I think being able to honestly relate to somebody when they are going through something because you have been through it is one of the
Right.
most special, and I don't know, I think it's one of the most beautiful truths that you can live. And so the letters have helped me heal, and I hope that they help other people heal. And that's really what it's all about.
Yeah, I think that's important to say. And I've said it on so many episodes, and I'll continue to say it as an empath. And specifically my generation, it was like, we don't stop crying about that. Don't feel, you feel too much. What does that mean? Right? Like, we're living a human experience. And to be an empath, I finally, in these last 10, 12, and I'll even say 15 years of my life, is when I finally looked at that as a superpower and as a gift that I'm able to feel so deeply. I connect on a level so deeply when I'm in a relationship with someone, a friendship, my children, my grandchildren, my own marriage. I feel very deeply. And so, yeah, I mean, sometimes that means you're bawling and you're sad and you're feeling all the feels, but I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't change it. And I wouldn't go back and tell anyone to ever not feel your feelings and to like stifle that. It is a superpower. And I think it helps us relate on such a much more personal level when we meet people. Like, that's what I always hear from people is like, wow, you get me. We connected right away because I feel your feelings as soon as we meet.
Mhm.
Like, I get it. I feel it. And that being said, if you could write a letter to your younger self, what would it say?
Again, I don't know if I would say too much, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I would want to spoil the surprises
Right.
for better or for worse, because I wouldn't want to influence the rawness of the perception of it. Because I think part of healing and growing and maturing is having moments where you really don't know if it's going to be okay. And
Right.
if you always are feeling this sense of, I guess, assurance, then you never really feel vulnerable. And I think vulnerability is what has spurred most of my growth worth talking about. It's like if I wasn't
Right.
constantly going through it, I don't even know what I would write about. So I think if I were to reach out
Right.
to the younger me, perhaps I would say some cliches and give him some generic life advice. But I think the biggest thing would be just to continue encouraging him to follow his heart fearlessly, and not because that's the safest journey, but because it's the one that's meant for him. And because if you believe in the butterfly effect or whatever alternate realities, parallel universes, I like where I'm at now, so I don't want him to do anything different. I want to,
Right. Yeah. We don't want to change history.
yeah,
Right.
exactly. I want to be who I am now, and so I'm sorry for him, but he's got to go through and become me, and I will be here to support him, and I'll be thankful for when this version of me looks into the future, and that future me gives me the same opportunity to grow and learn on my own.
Yeah, definitely. I did a workshop where I wrote a piece that'll be in this poetry book, and it was kind of like write that letter to your younger self. And the title of it is Querida Niña, which means dear daughter or dear child. But it was very much that. It very much like you're sitting in it now, and when you're in it, you think there's no way out, but everything you're going through is setting you up to be the better and most best and most beautiful version of yourself, because there's beauty in the brokenness, and that brokenness does not define you, but it shapes you. So, yeah, I don't think I would go back and change. I would never change anything. I wouldn't. You think you will when you're in it, but you won't, because it's made you who you are.
And
so
it prepares you for what's next. And I think that's important.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. A couple more questions and then we'll wrap. But if Paper Planes was adapted to the movie screen,
Ooh.
what would you want to make sure that is kept true? Because we've read books and we've seen them turned into movies, and sometimes that narrative has changed. So what is the one thing that you would say you absolutely cannot change this to, because it's what keeps true to the story?
I think the absolutely most unchangeable element of Paper Planes would be the cowardly emotions, in the sense of,
Hmm.
I wouldn't want them to make me seem more confident or sure or brave or even interesting than I was, because
Hmm.
I think if any of those factors were altered, then the story wouldn't make sense anymore. And I
Right.
think it would miss its whole purpose, because I don't know if there's anything inherently entertaining about my life or the experience that I've had. I think what makes it special is the vulnerability to stay true to a story regardless of how it was written. And so
Hmm.
if it were ever adapted to a movie, I hope that it reads true like a documentary more than a blockbuster film, so to speak,
Right.
because I really don't want to downplay the reality, and I wouldn't want to make any of it seem more glamorous than it was. And because I think it all needs, like, all the ingredients in the recipe
Hmm.
need to be what was in there
Right.
before, or the dish is just going to taste different. So I think,
Right.
yeah, I hope that answers the question.
No, it would be, yeah, I think it would definitely need to be more of a documentary style. Like, this is what I lived and how I lived. Um, so don't change it. I actually watched, and I'm probably way late on watching, but that's my life. I'm way late watching things, but I watched Senior, which was the documentary of Robert Downey Sr.,
Wow.
Robert Downey Jr. doing a documentary about Robert Downey Sr., right, who was also an actor and did these amazing, um, very interesting and very different creative projects. But when Robert Downey Jr. was kind of interviewed on what is this documentary, and he goes, well, if you ask me now, it's really that I hired this documentarian to document and do a documentary about my dad. And I thought it was going to be about our father son relationship, but it's really a documentary about my dad doing a documentary about the documentarian who's documenting the documentary because he changed it and he had a vision, right, as to what he wanted it to be like and what the story he wanted to put out. So even though this amazing documentarian was the one doing the documentary, Senior still needed to kind of be the one overseeing the project and making sure it was the tone
Hmm.
of who he was,
Yes.
right? So I agree with that. I think that's 100%. It should be a documentary. So if anyone's out there listening,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Paper Planes is a documentary, and we can talk more about it off screen.
I would love that. I would love that.
Love. Put it out in the universe. We're manifesting.
Yes,
We're
we
manifesting here.
my hand.
What's next for you as a writer? What are some of the stories that are on the horizon for you, or have you thought that far?
Always thinking in terms of stories. So I have one more, well, I have many more books that I would like to write eventually, but the next on the agenda is a book called Helium Heart, and
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be a fictional Alice in Wonderland type anecdotal story to convince you and encourage people to follow their hearts. And so
Mm.
I won't get into too much detail until I
No, please
further
don't.
into it, because I reserve the right to change my mind. But
Absolutely.
that's the premise, and essentially it really captures a lot of the feelings that I felt over the last year. It's a message that I've wanted to send for a long time, and I really would love to just sit and think about worlds where people follow their heart and what that would look like, and be honest about the answer, because maybe it's not as
Right.
glorious and glamorous as one would imagine. So
No, but I think that's beautiful because I think that this is what, for me, this season is. It's about following my heart, what's calling to me. And sometimes that's hard. And sometimes it's going to be messy and it's going to look different. But also, I said it before, but there's beauty in the mess and the brokenness. So, whatever that's supposed to be, like, I'm all in. I'm ready to do that. So, Helium Heart, let's hope that's on the horizon because I'm going to
it's in
read
the
it.
drafts right now.
Yeah, yeah, but like most writers, we have 10 things in the draft and 4 in the queue. So
So
I get that.
that's the next long-term project. Then short-term, I am beginning. I want to begin working more remotely so that I can continue
Mhm.
to travel and continue to chase these other little side quests that I'm always on.
Yeah.
So I'm leaning into the space of writing like creative campaigns for
Hmm.
little commercials for small brands, helping people find stories within their small businesses and kind of bring that to the forefront, because I really love the human experience, and I love
Hmm.
when a brand really encaptures what they're trying to say and what they're doing. They say it in a beautiful way that's meaningful in and of itself, regardless of what
Right.
they produce. So I think some sort of creating little ad agency or creative writing service. I'm not sure how I'm going to
Mm.
name it yet, but that's something that I really going to lean into in these next few months and try to get that off the ground. So that's
I
what
love that. I feel like little small businesses don't get their just desserts, and they don't get that top billing of getting noticed. So anyone who can put that out there for them and put it in a really beautiful way, which I'm sure we're going to manifest that as well. So you
yes.
can continue to write. And then, okay, last, is this the last question? Yes, it's going to be the last question.
Okay.
What message or feeling do you hope readers carry with them after they close that final page? Because I know when I closed it, I had to just sit. I had to just sit for a minute and absorb it. And yeah, I even journaled about it. But what do you hope that when they close that final page
Mm.
is a message from you, or a feeling that you hope they carry on with them?
I don't know what the feeling is called. I don't think we have the perfect word for it, but I want them to feel the opposite of loneliness. I
Mm.
think that is the feeling that I hope that they walk away from, because they may be able to have related to a lot of the trials and tribulations that I went through because they went through them. But when they went through them the first time, I'm assuming, like I felt, that they felt very alone in it and that they were
Mm-hmm.
swallowed by a sense of loneliness. So what I'm hoping is that after they close this book, they have become reassured that no matter what they go through moving forward, that someone is out there, maybe me, who has been through it as well or is going through it as well. And I think that's the ultimate takeaway that I would like somebody to carry with them in their backpack.
I love it. I love it. That's perfect. I don't think anything else needs to be said on that. But we do want to support Ryan Anthony Dube, author, writer. So, where can people find you, and how can they connect with you?
Yes, so if you want to connect with me directly and just check out my life and see what I'm up to, I am on Instagram at DubeKid, DubeKid. It's my personal Instagram. I am always creating and deleting my business accounts, so that's probably the most stable place to find me
Right, right.
on the internet. So you can say hi to me there. Reach out if you want to be pen pals. I'm still open and very down to write letters. I love writing letters, so you can reach out to me and we can connect over that. And then if you want to support the arts, if you want to order yourself a copy of either of the books, they're both on Amazon. So you can just Google or put into Amazon my name and either the Bandana Boy or Paper Planes, and they'll both show up. You can order them right to you. I have digital versions as well. I have Kindle versions if you are an electronic reader. So I hope
Yes.
that if you do decide to give the words a chance, that they resonate with you and that they make you feel more connected to me and to the human experience.
And I'll say it again. I've read both books and I love them both dearly. And um, it's always an interesting experience when someone personally, and then you're taking on their reading. But it's very much the human experience. Both of the books are very beautiful in the way that they relate to the human experience, and that everyone is going to get something out of it. So I strongly encourage you to get on Amazon and to order either The Bandana Boy or Paper Planes by Ryan Anthony Dube. And I will drop that information into the chat and into all the social media and all the promotions we'll be doing as this is coming out in just a couple weeks. So look for that when I post that on Instagram. All the links will be there. But thank you, Ryan, for taking time out. I know it's always hard to schedule things, but I'm so grateful that you took time out to talk with us and to share your journey and to kind of announce to everyone about your writing and your books.
And thank you for the opportunity to speak on what I love and to give me the opportunity to reach new people and maybe make some new pen pals. Who knows?
Yeah,
Yeah, thank you so much.
absolutely. Oh, thank you. So, thank you all for listening to the All in My Head podcast. I hope you have the best and most beautiful day.